Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Bo. You know, two people can be in the same room, but they could be worlds apart. In fact, they could actually be in different worlds. Because if we understand divine providence, we believe in divine providence, it means that God has His own individual relationship with each one of us, with all of creation, with every single person. And He's dealing a different hand to everyone at the same time. And therefore, one person's reality is really not going to be the same as another person's reality. And that's one thing that's really emphasized in the whole topic of the 10 plagues. The Jews and the Egyptians were in the same physical location, the same dimensions. They were located within the same coordinates, but they were not in the same world at all. If you look at the blood and the frogs and the hail, the wild beasts, these are things that came within the exact boundaries of the land of Egypt, but they had no effect in Goshen or other neighboring countries. An Israelite in Egypt was not affected, and an Egyptian outside of Egypt was affected. So for example, a Jew and an Egyptian be standing together, pouring out a cup of water from the same source. It's blood for the Egyptian, pure water for the Jew. And the frogs and the beasts and the lice attacked the Egyptians like a heat-seeking missile, but not the Jew. And how about the oppressive 3-day darkness, which was so thick that it was a tangible substance, had no effect on the Israelites, as the verse tells us. For all the children of Israel there was light in their dwellings. And when it came to the slaying of the firstborn, it wasn't an Egyptian house without a corpse, but to all of the children of Israel, not even a dog would bark. So throughout the whole saga of how God is dealing out this midah, this attribute of retribution, He's dealing with two worlds here. And those two worlds come to a collision here in Parashat Bo, if we're sensitive to it. Two separate worlds, the denizens of each respective world, the Egyptians and the Jews, each have their work to do, their tikkun, if you would, their rectification, which is really, as we can see so clearly in these parshiot, it's the clarification of their own identity. So Israel is being prepared for the ultimate redemption and the subsequent destiny of their fulfilling their role amongst mankind. And one of the purposes of the signs and the wonders and the miracles that God was performing in Egypt was to reveal Himself to the Egyptians in order to have a certain effect on them. And also the presence of the Jews in Egypt and the performance of these signs by Moshe and Aaron had another purpose, and that was, it was a design to bring the Egyptian people back. They're also God's creatures, and God, at least at first, certainly doesn't give up on anybody. And so the purpose of this tremendous, campaign of just slamming them over and over again was to ultimately bring people of Egypt back to God, to reconnect them with what they had lost, namely their own divine image in which they were created, their God consciousness, their relationship with God, the one true God, and their duty both to Him and to their fellow man, which they had completely lost and just had completely become so desensitized to the value of life. And this was really an opportunity for them to start all over again, to be reborn, to be renewed. But they were too far gone. They were too over the line. They had become so gross, so engrossed in their pagan mindset, in their blind worship of the natural world, wherein they couldn't allow for any exception, for any actual appearance of the one true God to change things. they were past coming back. So the effect, the desired effect not happening, all of a sudden, in our Parsha, in Parashat Bo, after the 8th plague and the 9th plague and the warning of the 10th plague, all of a sudden, our coverage of the Egyptian world is interrupted. And in the beginning of chapter 12, we are taken back to the world of the Jews again. There's two parallel worlds going on here in this Parsha, and they might be in extreme physical proximity, but they are in absolute different dimensions, absolute different separate realities. So, again, 8th plague comes and goes, 9th plague comes and goes, warning of the 10th plague, and then all of a sudden, chapter 12, Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be for you the first of the months of the year." And as the verse emphasizes, and it's very unusual, God speaks to Moshe and Aaron while yet in Egypt. This is an emphasis. This is happening in Egypt. God is instructing them in the first commandment given to the nation of Israel as a people, Rosh Chodesh, the sanctification of the new moon. This is taking place while yet in Egypt, and there's another switch that's going on here, because until now, Moshe and Aaron were spokesmen to Pharaoh. Now they have a new mission. They were spokesmen to Pharaoh in the name of Israel, in the name of the God of Israel, and now they're spokesmen to the people of Israel. And the question is asked, why is this the first mitzvah in the Torah? First commandment in the Torah that appears as a collective imperative for the entire nation. This is it. Exodus 12, they received it while yet in Egypt. God spoke to them in the land of Egypt. Why? Why is this the first commandment that they received? And why did they receive it while yet in Egypt? They hadn't achieved their freedom yet. They hadn't graduated yet to that stage of the redemption. But yet God saw fit to give them this mantle, this understanding, this goal, which is an eternal covenant, Rosh Chodesh, one of the most specific identities of the Jewish people. Gave it to them while they were still in Egypt. So obviously there's a simple reason. And the simple reason is not so simple, but it's really essentially the idea of being able to calculate time according to the time of the redemption, according to the month of the redemption, because for all practical purpose, this moment is the beginning of time. Time had no meaning before now, before going out of Egypt, when the Jewish people were not their own masters, they were servants to Pharaoh. And now everything is changing. So now is kind of the birth of time. But there's also something much deeper going on here, relating to the whole concept of these two worlds colliding right now, in the beginning of chapter 12, where all of a sudden where the narrative is leaving the track of the retribution being visited upon Egypt and their reaction, or rather their non-reaction, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, while yet in Egypt, we have this incredible divine communication of Rosh Chodesh, sanctification of the new moon. So Rashi tells us something here. Name of our sages, really interesting comment. Some might see it, again, as merely anecdotal, but it has a very deep meaning. Rashi says, when the verse tells us that Hashem says, "This month shall be for you the beginning of the months," it's alluding to the fact that God actually showed Moshe and Aaron a silver crescent of the moon, took them over to the window and showed them, because Moshe didn't understand maybe exactly at what stage of the renewal of the lunar cycle is it time to sanctify the new month. So God actually showed him an image, and it showed him exactly what it looks like. As if to say, come over to the window for a moment, you see that? That's when it happens, that moment. That moment precisely. So we get the feeling of something happening here of Moshe and Aaron while everything is falling apart all around them, and the old order, despotic order of the king of denial, Pharaoh, that's D-E-N-I-A-L, no pun intended, is falling apart. And at the threshold of this new world, this renewed world, Hashem is saying to Moshe, look out the window and take a look at this model. That's going to be your model. Doesn't that remind us of something? That imagery. At this point, on the brink of a world that is going from one stage of existence to another, come over to the window and take a look. It's reminiscent of the moment when, just as God told Noah, after re-giving the earth to man, God showed Noah the rainbow and told him, this is going to be the sign of my covenant with you for all time, my guarantee, the new future that I promised to humanity. In the same way, God is now in Egypt at the threshold of the new future for the Jewish people, which is potentially to become the new future for all mankind. He's calling Moshe and Aaron into the open, and he's showing them the new moon, and he's saying, this renewal is to be for you the beginning of the new moons. It's a beginning of renewal, beginning of revival, of rejuvenation. And actually, this commandment is actually two mitzvot in one. It is the concept of the fixing of the beginning of a new month with the appearance of the new moon becoming visible. And it's also the concept of starting the order of the months of the year with Nisan, which is the month of redemption. And so the question that I'm asking is, why now? What is the significance of the introduction, on one level, of Rosh Chodesh at this particular critical point? Again, there had been a desired effect that the Makot should have on Paro and on the Egyptians, and it wasn't working. So why now? Why is Hashem giving over Rosh Chodesh, look, right now on the threshold of this new era? And why is it so similar to the position in which Noah found himself? Because nothing worked for Paro. He was so insensitive and so invested in his pagan mindset and so unwilling to consider anything but this natural order that he worshipped, that Hashem is really saying to Moshe, to say to the people of Israel, you, my people, you should never become like that. And now he's beginning to design for them a life with an oath, with a sign. Just like the sign, the oath of the rainbow, this sign is going to be a regular, recurring sign that will always be able to draw my people back and to ensure a constant cycle of rebirth and purity. And it would protect Israel from the same type of spiritual and moral decay that afflicted Egypt. Now, wait a minute, you could ask, but wait a minute, isn't this also part of the natural order? Wasn't this Paro's whole problem, that he refused to see Hashem because he was so stuck in the way things are? And this is happening every month. This is also part of the same natural order that Paro worshipped, and because of which he denied God. But the difference is the beauty of the Torah, teaching us that the new moon has to be sighted. It has to be sighted by witnesses who come before the Beit Din, the court. And the fixing of the month is left up to the people of Israel. And there's another reason why the Rosh Chodesh has to be fixed, because the Mo'adim, which are the holidays, the festivals, the observances, the They can be defined as the divine convocations, but the moadim, moed, it really means a meeting. Because the Jewish observances throughout the year, they are a rendezvous with God. And these moadim are fixed by the calendar. And a moed is when we come together with Hashem, and it's mutual. It's from both sides. It's not just about the laws of nature. It's not just, because that would be the cult of nature of Pharaoh. It wouldn't, in other words, that was the problem with Egypt. But this is about not just the moon receiving the illumination of the sun afresh, but it's about the moon finding the sun again. And it's about God broadcasting to his people that he wants his people to find him again and to be constantly refreshed and renewed. And in the course of our run, just like the moon has a course to run, we pass through darkness. And this renewal of the moon, that Hashem, at this very moment, in the midst of all the mire of Egypt, Hashem is showing Moshe this moon and saying, this is the picture, your model of rejuvenation and renewal. And if it wouldn't be for this capacity, this potential for renewal, then we would also become like Pharaoh. And therefore, while yet in Egypt, in the dark land of paganism, God calls Moshe to the window. And he says, this moon is the model that just as it struggles through darkness, and it's bound by physical laws, but yet it rejuvenates itself, so you also, of your own free will, you create your own renewal and rejuvenation. And that, of course, is so fitting for this to be the first mitzvah of the Torah, because of this human involvement that actually God gives us the capacity to design time as a vehicle for meeting him and to be constantly renewed. This first mitzvah encapsulates the whole concept of the Torah, that it's up to us, that everything is up to us, and the basis of our experience, and therefore the basis of time, is our ability, through our own initiative and our own effort, to seek and achieve renewal.